The tray hit the table hard enough to rattle the silverware. 38 residents sat in that dim dining hall at Cedar Brook Memory and Care. Most of them staring at nothing, most of them beyond caring what landed in front of them. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like something trapped. The room smelled of boiled vegetables and antiseptic, of a life lived in diminishing circles. Naomi Adaize Okonkwo moved between the rows the way she always did, quietly, efficiently, eyes taking in everything at once. 12-hour shift, third double in a row. She had a child at home, textbooks she hadn't opened in 6 days, and a pain behind her left eye she'd been ignoring since Tuesday. She was pushing the cart past table C when she stopped. Just stopped. Dead still. Her eyes dropped to the bowl of soup sitting in front of the tiny woman in the blue cardigan. Mrs. Sook-Yi Hwang, table CC2, 81 years old, barely 100 pounds. A woman who still pressed her hands together and closed her eyes before every meal, the way her own mother had taught her. Something was wrong with that soup. Naomi couldn't name it. Not yet. But in the hollow part of her gut where instinct lives, something screamed. She looked left. She looked right. Then, in one smooth motion, so fast, so quiet, so precise that most people in that room would have sworn nothing happened, she switched the bowls. The old woman's soup slid to the cart. A different bowl landed in its place. From across the room, standing near the doorway in a black tailored coat that cost more than Naomi's monthly rent, a man watched. He hadn't touched the coffee someone had placed beside him. He hadn't looked at his phone. He had stood perfectly still for 11 minutes, watching his mother eat her dinner. He watched Naomi. He did not blink. The voiceover drops to almost nothing. Someone was trying to kill the Korean Mafia's mother, inside a nursing home, in front of 38 witnesses, and a young black caregiver from Lagos, Nigeria, a woman who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, had just walked into the middle of it. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Stories like this one drop every single week. Sook-Yi Hwang was not the kind of woman people wrote songs about. She had not led revolutions or won prizes. She had not appeared on television or spoken at podiums. She had spent 43 years running a small, imported goods shop in Koreatown, Los Angeles, a cramped, overstocked space on 6th and Vermont that smelled of dried persimmons and sesame oil, and the specific kind of patient labor that immigrants carry in their bones. She had come to America at 27, with her husband Byung-ho, 2 suitcases, and a daughter she was already carrying. Byung-ho died of a heart attack when their son, Jae-won, was only 9. After that, Sook-Yi ran the shop alone. She woke at 4:30 every morning. She never complained. She saved everything. She gave her children the kind of childhood she'd never had. Stable, warm, filled with books and possibility. What Jae-won did with that childhood was not what she had imagined. By the time he was 30, Jae-won Hwang had a different name in certain Los Angeles circles. Not a name spoken at dinner tables or announced in polite company. A name whispered in the particular way people whisper things they're afraid might summon what they're talking about. He ran operations across 3 counties. Financial networks, import channels, influence corridors that touched everything from construction contracts to shipping manifests. He had men who moved on his word alone. He had lawyers who didn't ask questions. He also had a mother who still called him every Sunday and asked if he was eating properly. Sook-Yi had refused the mansion in Hancock Park, refused the penthouse in Koreatown. When her memory began to soften at the edges, small things at first, then larger ones, she had sat Jae-won down and told him clearly, in the way only Korean mothers of a certain generation can communicate absolute non-negotiation, that she would choose her own facility. She chose Cedarbrook because it had a garden with peonies, and because the woman at the front desk had been kind to her during the tour. Jae-won had the entire facility vetted within 48 hours. Background checks, financial records, visitor logs. A security consultant who'd previously worked for a 3-letter federal agency spent a week walking every corridor. They found nothing alarming. They should have looked harder. Naomi Adaizi Okonkwo had grown up watching her father die slowly. Not all at once. Not the way grief is supposed to arrive. Sudden, enormous, leaving no room for anything else. Her father, Emeka Okonkwo, had declined over 7 years inside a care facility in Compton that smelled like the one she now worked in, except worse, and with half the staff and none of the funding. He had been moved to that facility after a stroke left him unable to speak clearly or walk without assistance. The nurses had been overworked. The aides had been underpaid. The management had been absent. Small signs appeared, then larger ones. Weight loss. Bruises that no one documented. Medications given at the wrong times or not at all. Naomi had been 19 the first time she noticed something genuinely wrong and reported it to the charge nurse, who had nodded and written nothing down. Her father died at 62. The official cause was listed as complications from his underlying condition. Naomi was 21. She had a 6-month-old daughter and no degree, and a rage inside her that she had learned very carefully to convert into something useful. She enrolled in a certified nursing assistant program, then a practical nursing program. She applied to Cedarbrook specifically because its patient-to-staff ratio was among the best in the county, and because she intended, eventually, to move into registered nursing and then into hospital administration because she had decided, with the specific, unshakable clarity of someone who has watched institutional failure up close, that she would fix things from the inside. She had been at Cedarbrook for 2 years and 4 months. She had already filed 3 internal incident reports. 2 of them had resulted in staffing corrections. The 3rd was still under review. She was not by temperament or by training a woman who ignored what she saw. It started with almonds. The smell was faint, barely there, hovering beneath the chicken broth like something underneath water. But Naomi had a sharp nose. She always had. Her mother used to say she could smell a lie from 2 rooms away. The scent of bitter almonds does not belong in hospital food. She had learned that in a toxicology module during her practical nursing program, presented as a curiosity rather than a warning. Cyanide compounds, particularly potassium cyanide and certain amygdalin derivatives, carried a distinctive almond-adjacent scent that a significant percentage of humans cannot detect due to a genetic trait. Naomi was in the percentage that could. She stood beside table C for no more than 4 seconds. Then she switched the bowls. Later that night, after her shift ended, she went back to the kitchen. The overnight aide had already cleared and cleaned, but Naomi had noted the specific tray, table C, the blue-trimmed one with the chipped corner. And she checked the kitchen trash with gloved hands and a flashlight borrowed from the storage closet. In a folded paper napkin near the bottom of the first bin, she found residue. A fine pale powder, odorless now, dispersed. But her hands were shaking when she stepped back. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Sook-Yi Hwang ate her breakfast and asked Naomi if the garden peonies had bloomed yet. Not yet, Naomi told her, but soon. She smiled and meant it, and thought about her father. Jae-won received the call at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. It came from a private number routed through a secure line, and the voice on the other end belonged to a man whose entire purpose in life was to deliver information that no one else could. Your mother nearly didn't wake up this evening. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. I'm listening, Jae-won said. He was in his car in 12 minutes. Cedar Brook in 31. He did not speed. He did not call ahead. He did not raise his voice when he arrived at the front desk at 12:42 a.m. and informed the overnight administrator, a nervous man named Gerald, who immediately understood from the quality of the silence in the lobby that something had shifted in the atmosphere, that he would be staying until morning. Gerald offered coffee. Jae-won sat down in the cafeteria and watched the clock. By 7 a.m., when the morning shift arrived, 3 things had already become clear. The security footage from the dining hall camera covering table C between 6 and 7 p.m. the previous evening was gone. Not corrupted, gone, cleanly excised, in a manner that suggested someone who understood security systems. The kitchen aide who had prepared and delivered table C's tray had called in sick that morning for the first time in his 18 months at Cedar Brook. And a caregiver named Naomi Okonkwo had submitted at 2:17 a.m. through the facility's internal reporting system an incident report flagging concerns about a patient meal at table C. Jae-won read the report on Gerald's monitor. He read it twice. Then he asked Gerald to tell him everything he knew about Naomi Okonkwo. If you're still watching up, to now, type I'm still here in the comment section, because what happens next changes everything. Jae-won did not summon Naomi. That was the part that frightened the staff most. A man like Jae-won Hwang arriving at a facility and demanding answers that people knew how to process. Fear was legible. Aggression had a grammar. But Jae-won spent 2 full days simply present. He sat in the cafeteria at mealtimes. He walked the garden at noon. He nodded at staff when they passed him. He said nothing threatening to anyone. And yet doors locked faster when he approached. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The kitchen supervisor, a compact man named Morris, who had worked at Cedar Brook for 11 years, began taking a different route to his office. Naomi watched all of it. She had recognized Jae-won the moment she saw him standing in the doorway that first evening. Not because she knew who he was specifically, but because she knew the category, the quality of stillness. The way expensive clothes hung on a man who had learned to carry danger quietly. The way everyone in a room adjusted their posture without realizing they'd done it. She told herself it wasn't her business. She told herself that for about 18 hours. On the second afternoon, she found Morris in the supply corridor outside the medication room, and she asked him directly, the way her mother had taught her to ask hard questions, without apology and without softening, whether he had seen anyone unusual near the kitchen Thursday afternoon. Morris's face did something complicated. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "That's fine," Naomi replied. "I'll just add it to the incident report that I filed this morning." She hadn't filed anything yet. But Morris didn't know that. He pulled her into the supply room and closed the door. What he told her came out in pieces, broken up by silences and half-sentences, and a visible need to convince himself he wasn't doing anything wrong by speaking. 6 weeks prior, Cedar Brook had received a substantial private donation, $400,000, routed through a charitable foundation with a San Francisco address, specifically earmarked for upgrades to the East Wing, where Sook-Yi Hwang had been placed. The donation had come with a single, seemingly innocuous administrative request that Mrs. Hwang remain assigned to the East Wing for continuity of care. The administrator, not Gerald, but the facility director, a man named Philip Sanger, who had been at Cedar Brook for 3 years, had approved everything without escalating it. The money was legitimate. The foundation checked out. The request seemed reasonable. What Morris had noticed, what had lodged in his mind like a splinter, was that, beginning 3 weeks ago, a different meal tray began arriving for Table C on Thursday evenings. Not through the regular kitchen prep process. Through a side arrangement that Morris had been told by Sanger himself was a dietary supplement protocol approved by the attending physician. Morris had never been shown documentation for that protocol. He had asked once and been told not to worry about it. He had worried about it. But he had done nothing. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. "You knew something was wrong," she said, not as an accusation. Morris looked at the floor. "I have kids," he said. She left the supply room and stood in the corridor alone for 30 seconds, breathing. Then she went to find Jae-won Hwang. The garden was empty when she walked out to it. He was standing near the far wall, where the peonies were beginning to bud, his hands in his coat pockets, looking at nothing in particular with the focused attention of a man accustomed to turning things over in his mind until they break open. "You're the one who switched the plate," he said, without turning around. Naomi stopped walking. "Yes." He turned then. His face was harder than she'd expected up close. Angular, composed, with eyes that processed information quickly and revealed nothing. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they need to understand before they can decide what to do with it. "Why?" he asked. The word was simple, but it was the question behind the question that she heard. Not just, "Why did you do it?" but "Why would you risk yourself for a stranger? Why would you put yourself in the path of something you didn't understand? Why?" Naomi thought about her father. The bruises, the nurse who wrote nothing down. "Because someone once ignored the signs when my father was dying," she said. "And I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to be that person." The silence stretched between them. Jae-won looked at her for a long time. not with the appraising look she'd braced for, not calculating, not searching for angles. Something quieter than that. "Tell me what you found," he said. She told him everything. Bye. That evening, Jae-won's people had traced the foundation's donation back to its source. The name that emerged was Chul-hyun Bae, 73 years old, former textile industry executive, currently residing in a Pacific Heights townhouse in San Francisco, with properties in Seoul and Vancouver. On paper, a retired businessman of comfortable means. In the specific kind of financial and social history that Jae-won's people knew how to read. Something more complicated. 22 years prior, Sook-Yi Hwang had been called as a witness in a civil case involving fraudulent trade documentation and money laundering through a Koreatown import business. She had known the men involved. She had testified truthfully about conversations she had heard, transactions she had observed from her adjacent shop, documents she had seen exchanged. Her testimony had been one thread in a larger unraveling. Chul-hyun Bae had lost everything in the subsequent legal and financial collapse. His business, his partnerships, his standing in the community. His son, Min-jun Bae, who had been 26 and newly married at the time, had been implicated in the fraud, had served 2 years, and had come home to nothing. 3 years after his release, Min-jun Bae had died by suicide. Chul-hyun Bae had blamed Sook-Yi, not the men who had built the fraud, not himself, for involving his son. Sook-Yi Hwang, the grocer woman who had told the truth under oath, who had, in his version of events, destroyed his family. He had waited 22 years. He had not tried to kill her quickly. The poison in the soup, a slow-acting compound that degraded in the body and produced symptoms consistent with age-related neurological decline, had been designed to make her simply seem to deteriorate, to waste away inside that facility, to suffer and to diminish, and to die in a way that looked like nothing at all. Not justice, not even revenge. Just cruelty, wearing the mask of patience. Jae-won sat with this information for a long time. Naomi was charting in the nurse's station when he found her. He came alone, which surprised her. He stood in the doorway and said quietly, "I need you to understand something." She set down her pen. "The woman who testified against Bae's people," he said, "told the truth. My mother did not destroy his son. His son was involved in something that destroyed itself. And she carried that choice to tell the truth. At a cost I don't think she ever fully told anyone." Naomi waited. "She lost customers after that," he said. "People in the community who thought she should have stayed quiet. She kept the shop open for 6 more years because she refused to let what she'd done feel like a mistake." He was quiet for a moment. "She's not just my mother," he said. "She's the reason I know what a spine looks like." Philip Sanger, the facility director, was confronted in his office at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, not by Jae-won's people, not with threats or leverage, by Naomi, with a printed copy of the incident report, the donation documentation she had requested through administrative channels, and a question she asked with a level of composed precision that, she would later say, surprised even her. Sancture lasted about 4 minutes. The collapse, when it came, was not dramatic. He didn't yell or deny furiously or slam anything. He simply seemed to deflate a man who had told himself a story about money and harmlessness and not quite knowing for long enough that confronting the full shape of it in daylight became suddenly unbearable. He had known the Thursday tray was irregular. He had not asked what was in it. He had told himself that not knowing was a kind of innocence. He had told himself this for 6 weeks while cashing the foundation's donor recognition check. The Thursday kitchen aide, a young man named Luis, who had worked at Cedar Brook for 18 months and supported his mother and 2 younger sisters, had been told by Sanger that the special tray was a confidential pharmaceutical trial, that it was authorized, that it was routine. Luis had believed him completely. The poison had come from elsewhere. The supply chain led back, through 3 intermediaries, to a private pharmacy operation in Oakland with ties to Chul Hyun Bei's son-in-law. Jae-won received all of this information in writing. He sat in his mother's room while she slept, and he held it. Sook-Yi Hwang did not retaliate. This was the part of the story that would be whispered in Koreatown for years. Not the poisoning, not the investigation, not the unraveling of a 22-year plan of revenge. The part people couldn't quite reconcile was what he chose to do next. He handed everything to a federal attorney he trusted, not to protect himself, not as leverage. He handed it over cleanly, completely, with documentation, and he stepped back. Chul Hyun Bai was arrested in San Francisco 6 weeks later. Sanger was terminated and referred for criminal investigation. The foundation was dissolved. People who knew Jae-won, who understood the grammar of what men like him typically chose when someone reached for their family, asked, in careful and indirect ways, why. He never answered directly, but those who had known him longest, who had been present at his mother's bedside long enough to hear her speak, understood. No matter what you become, Sook-Yi had told him years ago in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. Don't lose your soul. He had nearly forgotten that. Nearly. Sook-Yi recovered fully. On the morning the peonies bloomed in the garden, Naomi found her sitting in the corner chair by the window, watching them with the unhurried attention of a woman who had decided to pay close attention to the time she had left. She took Naomi's hand when she sat beside her. "I heard what you did," Salford said. "I just switched a bowl," Naomi said. Sook-Yi shook her head slowly, the way women of a certain age and a certain wisdom shake their heads at an incomplete answer. "You saw what others chose not to see," she said. "That is not small. That has never been small." Naomi thought of her father. The bruises, the nurse who wrote nothing down, the version of herself at 19, standing in a corridor, too young and too powerless and too ignored to make anyone listen. She did not cry, but it was close. 4 months later, Naomi received a letter confirming her enrollment in the registered nursing program at Cal State LA. The tuition had been fully covered by an anonymous donor. She knew who it was. She did not call to say thank you. Instead, the next Sunday, she arrived at Cedar Brook 30 minutes early and sat with Sook-Yi while the old woman watched the garden and told her stories about a small shop on 6th and Vermont, about a husband who laughed loudly and died too soon, about a boy who grew up difficult and brilliant and lost and was still, underneath all of it, hers. Jae-won visited every Sunday now. He left the phone in the car. Power can protect or it can destroy. Silence can be complicity or survival. Courage courage, in the end, is rarely loud. Sometimes it's a woman pushing a cart between dinner tables, stopping when something inside her says stop, switching a bowl with steady hands while a room full of people see nothing at all. Naomi Okonkwo had learned, from the worst moment of her life, to pay attention. And paying attention at exactly the right moment had saved a woman she barely knew, and had, in ways she wouldn't fully understand until later, saved something in herself. Some choices only matter because you make them when no one's watching. When there's no applause, no safety net, no guarantee of anything except that you looked at a thing clearly and decided you would not be the person who looked away. If you were Naomi, standing at that cart in that moment, with everything to lose and nothing promised, would you have switched the bowl? If you were Jae-won, holding the name of the man who tried to destroy what you love most, would you have chosen restraint? Leave your answer in the comments. This community has the most thoughtful people on YouTube, and we read every single one. And if this story moved you, if it gripped you, made you feel something real, please hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second and it means everything to this channel. Subscribe so you never miss a story. Every day we bring you narratives like this one, built on human complexity, moral weight, and the kind of truth that only lives inside the choices people make when everything is on the line. Next week, a secret buried beneath a church basement for 31 years will unravel an entire family and force one woman to choose between protecting the past and saving the future. You do not want to miss it.